let's get your take on this, because I know Ron Rivera has made comments about a healthy Cam Newton, which would lead you to believe that he'd at least be interested.
Sure, yeah, and he was everything you hear is it would have. I mean, obviously he was with him in Carolina for a long time. That was his guy, and they were a lot more successful when he was healthy and on the field. And I know, like ESPN's Matthew Berry does a notebook, kind of an exhaustive notebook every year after the Combine. And one of the things he came away with, and this, I think he wrote this, obviously after the Combine, so a couple weeks ago, was that in his opinion, Rivera would be very, very interested in him if he came free. So, here we are, and I know Josina Anderson just said, and this is logical. They're not going to go trade for him. You're not going to trade. You're not going to give up a pick and then take on a $19 million contract. That wouldn't make sense. So I think, I don't know where this goes, if he comes free or not, if they really would go after him or not. I don't think we know that they want to add a veteran quarterback. That's what we know. That we know that they want somebody who, and Ron Rivera said that he wanted somebody who not only could just come in and help Dwayne Haskins, but push him as a starting possibility. So, that's what we know they want. So I think you can just go by that for now. Whether or not they get him, I don't know. The one benefit here, guys, is I was talking about this even earlier in the week, is that Cam Newton knows the offense. What happens if these guys are holed up until July? Mm-hmm. It's
insta fit.
This is not about trying to stunt Dwayne Haskins' growth. I don't think it would be. I think you want someone who can go in there and execute what you're going to run. And
right.
So I think to me that's a huge reason why you'd have to weigh that and consider it. And it's not about saying, it's not about saying, Dwayne's not our guy. He can still be your guy, but if you have a plan, the plan shouldn't be, hey, you know what, I know you haven't touched the playbook, or I know you, wink, wink, maybe he has,
sure.
But I know you haven't, we haven't run this with you and all that, but go out and run it now at an NFL level. That's difficult. So
it's a great point, John. You bring up a great point, because I don't think people are talking about the fact that, okay, obviously this is devastating to all our lives, but now let's get back to just the trivial world of sports. This is destroying his offseason where there's so much work that needs to be done. I mean, it's absolutely destroying it.
Yes. And I think, and so how do you compensate for that? And how do you adjust? And now as a coaching staff, here's the funny thing, because just like in the 2011 lockout, you had to adjust. And, maybe you have to simplify more things, but you can't, that's always a phrase that everybody wants to use. Well, just simplify it, as if that's always the answer. You still things you have to know and read and adjust within those offenses. So that, and again, everything you hear about Dwayne Haskins' offseason has been good. It's not a comment on that, but it is something you'd have to weigh, because if you want to go out and be competitive right away, it's hard if you're not sure where the quarterback is with all of his knowledge. They just won't know. You can't, they may not be around these guys for several months. So, and now if you signed Cam Newton to a 5-year deal, well, that says one thing. If you just said you're giving him a 1-year deal, see where things are at, then that says something totally different.
So a month ago, Rivera at that charity yard sale he had in Charlotte said regarding Cam Newton, I wouldn't bet against him. So it's not like he was over the top in his comments, but I would just say this is opinion, and we can kick this around, the four of us. And Drab brought this up during the break. If they sign Cam Newton and they draft Chase Young, and, they brought in Thomas Davis, and we'll talk to you about that, and the other linebacker, to me, they got a shot at the playoffs. There are more playoff teams.
Well, listen, I think this defense could be really good with the addition of Chase Young. You're looking at a front that could be really, really good. And I think that should cover up a lot of sins. I think you have to take into effect, too, a couple other things, because I know they're coming off a 3-13 year. And who knows. But last year was such a – I don't think you can adequately describe what a disaster that place was,
Yes.
and especially being out there every day. And just the impact on the change, and then a stronger coaching staff. And I think a staff with more direction, detail, et cetera. So how much will that be worth? And I think that's where you also take that in. I think you can, people worrying about not getting certain guys in free agency, I think you still have to take some of those other factors into account when you're looking at the upcoming year. So I think you could contend for the playoffs, but I don't know. And I think the other thing is, again, I go back to what I said earlier. If we don't see them again until August, the start of training camp, then you will be in a position where more experienced staffs and more experienced teams probably have a better shot. Because the other thing, too, and this is another factor with it, what are these guys doing in the offseason? They can't go work out. You need a bunch of veterans who know how to, basically police themselves with workouts in the offseason, because it's going to be mostly solo, right? So I think that's another thing to throw onto that, too. It just feels like it's almost like you're coming off that 87 strike year where, like, the teams that prepare the best will be in the best shape to handle something like this.
Joined by John Keim, covers the Redskins for ESPN.com. So you talked about the potential for that defense. Let's talk about some of the guys they brought in. What are we looking at linebacker? I know they re-signed Bostic. Thomas Davis, who was one of Ron Rivera's guys, who's 37 years old, but I think he had more tackles last year than anybody on the Redskins. He's going to be out of the linebacking core. What else what's it shaping up to look like?
So what had been described to me a couple of weeks ago was Cole Holcomb would be your strong side linebacker. They really like him. So now you got Bostic and Sean Dion Hamilton in the middle. Bostic is a smart guy, and I think, a few of us, like Craig Hoffman and I, would talk about this a lot. Like, if that team was pretty good last year, people would have realized just how smart that guy was. He has been a journeyman linebacker. We know that. And so you can look at the resume. It is what it is. But he is a smart guy. And I think and then you have Thomas Davis on the outside, and they added this Kevin Pierre-Louis. Now, they love him for special teams. And, he could go out there and compete for a job, but I think he'd be better as special teams spot starter. And then the other factor in there is Reuben Foster, who they would put on the weak side. The problem there is they don't know when that guy will be ready. And I get asked for updates about him every day, and you don't know. There is no update. They don't know when he's going to be ready. So you have to prepare as if you don't know when he'll be ready. So he may not be ready till who knows. So he's a what if. But that's the linebacking core. I think one of the common threads, Davis, Bostic, Sean Dion Hamilton, Cole Holcomb, for whatever it's worth, it's a very smart group that knows how to prepare. And, as somebody because Davis is being brought in as much for his leadership as everything else. And I know people hear that and think Ryan Clark, Deshaun Goldson, and all that. And, yeah, if he can't play, then it doesn't help you. He did show that he could still play. He was in this defensive system in Carolina. I was going to say San Diego. The Chargers ran a different system, out of 4-3. What he was asked to do didn't always seem quite as comfortable. So I think they're hoping that being back in this system will allow him to play the way he has in the past. I don't know what he has left. I know the guy was very, very good, and I think that's what you're looking at there. It's a very, very smart group, though. If nothing else.
J.K., I know we're early in the game in free agency, and a lot of the big names are off the board, and I know they were in play, at least on Cooper. But why haven't the Skins been more active in the first few days of free agency, in your opinion? Is there something to that?
What I was told going into it was they would be aggressive for the guys they want, and that was Amari Cooper. That was the big target. Some of the other guys, while they had interest in him for a few weeks, they did not have interest in them going into this period. So, I don't think like people here, being aggressive and think they're going to go out and get everybody. It's being aggressive for the guys you want, and then being prudent on some of the other guys. And I think they're kind of toggling that line. So in Carolina, they were more of the second wave type team, kind of what the Redskins have become in recent years as well. This is not a change for them necessarily. I mean, last year was Landon Collins, but typically the Redskins have not been that primary wave team the last several years. So this is kind of following suit. But, I think the other thing, too, is like for them, they looked at a John Bostic and said, well, you compare him to what some of the other guys are on that market at that position, and does the price difference you have to pay is it good enough in terms of the production that you go that route? And they clearly answered no. And I think the other thing too, guys, is every time I talk to people over there, it's like the phrase is build it right. You got to build it right. You got to build it right. And when you're building it right, it's not just building it for right now. You're building it for now, next year, the year after. And so if you're looking at guys that you think is like, Austin Hooper, yeah, he's good, but is he good? How good is he? Well, if you don't think he's that good, do you really want to tie up that much into that position right now? You know what I mean? So, because you do have other factors in the next couple of years that you're going to weigh, and if you're building it right, that's what you're doing. So, I don't know where else is going to go. There are going to be other guys available, I'm sure, that they go after, but they've been fairly quiet with a lot of things. So, but, like I said, I always felt it was aggressive for the guys they want, and that was Amari Cooper, and they didn't get him.
Now, they did bring back Fuller. We talked about this yesterday. I'm guessing he's going to be a slot corner. What's the secondary looking like? And I'm guessing they're going to have to beef that up in the draft.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to address it. And I think, again, Rivera's history has been with, like, for example, free safety. He's not going to pay big for a free safety. So I think that's still a spot you may address because Monte Nicholson is there now. I don't know that. I think it'd be hard for a new staff to come in and say we're going to rely on him. I don't see that. So, and then you also have Fabian Moreau out there who can play on the outside, better on the outside than he was in the slot. And you have guys like Danny Johnson, Greg Stroman, Jimmy Moreland, a slot guy. That's where Kendall will play. Fuller can also swing back to free safety in some looks, some coverages. So I think, it wouldn't shock me if maybe something else happens there or here in the draft. But I don't think that's a finished product. Again, I go back to like the guys like Byron Jones and James Bradbury. I mean, there's a lot of money to pay, and those guys aren't playmakers. And I remember I was talking to some defensive coaches before this, and while they liked these players, they felt like that was too much money to pay for guys who haven't been playmakers. So, so I think you still address it. And listen, that secondary, if the front does what it should, that secondary will be helped. And if you play with better communication and more, strict attention to your jobs, then that will help them too.
The offensive line, John, I mean, that's another area they really have to address.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So what do you think their plans are there?
Well, you still need a left tackle, right? I mean, unless they don't trade Trent Williams and they say you got to come back and play, you need a left tackle. And I think the left guard will be interesting. I like Wes Martin, the guy they drafted last year. This Wes Schweitzer that they just signed, he was not, I don't think, like Falcons fans were sorry to see him leave. I haven't really studied him, so I don't know, but that's what you hear. But I think if nothing else, there's depth inside that they haven't had in a while. But yeah, I mean, you've got to solidify that, and really, it's left tackle that you have to solidify. And so I don't know what there are. Honestly, I'm not sure what they're going to do there because my guess would be you end up getting some sort of a stopgap guy and you address it in a stronger way next year because you can't look at the draft as a place to do that unless you trade back. And then, I don't know that they're going to do that. So other than if you don't do that, you're looking at stopgap measures. But, yeah, I think the left guard will be interesting. Like I said, I like Wes Martin. I thought he was going to unseat Eric Flowers during the year last year, and then Flowers played better than people expected. But I know people there were expecting Martin to become the starter within a month into that season. That's what they thought of him. So I still think he's the guy to watch there. But Yeah, I mean that's an area that you need to make sure is solidified. I mean, with Brandon Scherff back, I mean, he's got to play 16 games or at least more than he has. I mean, otherwise you're going to struggle again.
Do we have any idea if Scherff is upset?
About getting tagged?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think he can because he had to know this was coming. Everybody else did. So, he turned down a couple of deals from them, and he knew that they wanted to keep him. I think what any player, I don't know that any player necessarily likes to be tagged because you want that security from a long-term deal, and I think that's what anybody wants. That's why I think they're going to continue talking to him. I don't think it will be this intense back and forth. I get the feeling it'll be going to him a couple times before that July 15th deadline, making a final offer, and then if he doesn't, then you just move on. Or not move on in terms of like you're not negotiating more until after the season.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I know when Kirk Cousins went through it for the first time, he was upset / disappointed because in his mind, it's like, well, if why won't you give me that long-term security? Why won't you, why don't you commit to me long-term? Everybody wants that. And I think a guy who's had as many injuries as Scherff has would want that security.